Welcome to Deep Thought, basic research. Now, I'm going to tell you what. People know who follow like all my channels, you're probably like, damn, Rom knows a lot. Research, basic research. So, one of the things is I want to just give a primer or cliff notes or, just something basic on doing research and what you can get from that. Now, the easiest way to do research, especially in this day and age, Google it. I'm gonna tell you what, when I was about 7 years old, one of the greatest gifts my grandmother gave me was an encyclopedia set. She gave me an encyclopedia set, and I went through that religiously. I went all the way through it from front end to back end. I would just look at everything. I was kind of a smart kid. And that's when I really got introduced to research. And then, of course, still learned it, high school. I was at a college prep high school, college, the graduate level. Just basically how to research. So at the basic, if you want to research something, just look it up. Now, back in the day, we'd have to go to the library or something and use the card catalog thing. Right now, it's like you can be on your phone, and sometimes I'll think of something and I'll just speak into the phone and it'll tell me everything and it'll lead it. So the basic research is, at the basic, just look it up. And you got information. In most things, you have some information. Now, if you somebody wrote about, somebody talked about it. In most things. So it's like that's the easy part. Now, say you want to research something that's people don't talk about as much. So you can still use the internet, but then I would say this. In fact, I'm gonna give you an example. I've mentioned several times being under the tutelage of Master Yao and Yamache Morse. Several times, right? But it's interesting how we met and how we started to click. And it was basically off of something that I started researching 2 years before I met him. And it was about natural sex appeal. And I'd say around 1996, I got a real interest in natural sex appeal. Basically, I was interested in finding out people who had a sexual nature and drew people to them in a sexual manner without the usual props that we have, or they didn't have money. Their looks might have been considered average. Or they didn't wear makeup. They didn't really do much. They just generated a sexual aura to them. Right? So I started looking into that. But it was very little information online, wherever, about it. But I stayed with it. So I would look up maybe something similar. I did look up natural sex appeal. It showed some young lady with a nice smile, and, she was pretty, but I was like, okay, this ain't telling me everything I need to know. But I started with that. And I started looking into different things, anything that was related. See, when you're doing research and it's not always obvious, try to think, okay, what's related to this? What is related to this? All right, so I looked up stuff. I even did an interview. Because at first I was looking into the, obvious physical aspect. And that's why, that's how I got into, looking at the more biological side of sex and everything. And I looked into that as well. And I was like, something's still missing, but I kept doing the research. And then that's when I met Master Yao. I met him at it was a public access TV show that I did back in the day, and he was in the audience. And then he was interviewed on that same show the next week. He was interviewed on that show the next week. And I remember after the show, I asked him, I said, hey, do you have anything? And he was talking about his book of Mummer. And I said, do you have anything on natural sex appeal? And to be honest, after 2 years, I was like, man, this is getting hard, but I stayed with it. And I thought he would just look at me funny. And he was like, oh, no, check out this chapter and this chapter. I was like, and I did it, and it was the answer, and it took me to another level. And that's when I first started learning about Tantra and stuff like that. So, and ironically, I had read, knew about the Tao of sexology before then. But then that took me in another way. But then that's how you do research. You ask questions. You read the books. Now, as you're reading the books, like say, okay, you go online and you see something and say, well, this book is talking about this. It's like, oh, okay. You get the book. So here's a trick. When you research, and don't just read what's in the book. Don't just read what's in the book. Definitely read it, but don't just stop there. Because I hear a lot of people, they'll stop there. You know, they'll read it and they'll just go on the paragraph or something because it supports some argument they have. That's not good research. Good research is not only read what's there, but looking at the footnotes. Going through the footnotes. Seeing what books. Now, a properly written research book, a properly written book on any nonfiction subject that's dealing more with the science of something will always have footnotes. Like someone that's just pure a person's opinion or viewpoint, yeah, they can just write that. That's nothing. And even then, they might reference something. But if you're talking about something that's been researched, that's been, looked at, somebody might have did a qualitative research, which is more like field research, or quantitative research, which is like putting together the numbers. They're going to have footnotes or endnotes. Usually endnotes. Endnotes are actually better. Like I don't care what book you have, if they really coming at it from an academic thing, they're going to have plenty of endnotes. Go through the main part, see what the person has to say, because ultimately that's their perception of the work. That's their perception. That's how they feel about it. Go through that, but then go through the endnotes and see where they got the idea from. See what books you have, what articles, and then look those up. And then say if they reference a book, get that book. You can get it. That's why you need a library card. Get that. And then see their endnotes. And see, then you start getting deeper and deeper. Okay, where did this idea come from? What did they say? And then sometimes you might see something different, because remember, each book is going to be the writer's interpretation. But that don't mean it's right or wrong, but it's their interpretation. Now, you might go back to one of their source materials and you get a different idea from it. And then just keep going back. Or usually if you get that source material, then through their endnotes, you get some other stuff, and you might come up with some stuff that had nothing to do with the original question, but still adds to it. Believe it or not. So you got to dig deep. When you're doing research, you got to dig deep. You got to dig deep. Don't really take something just at face value. What's behind it? Because there's always something behind it. And that's thorough. That's thorough research. Try to go as deep as you can. Just to get a good perspective on it. And then remember, I mentioned briefly qualitative research. That's just field research. See if you can apply it in the real world. If it makes sense. Okay, like it might say people do this and that in a certain situation. See if you can get in that situation and see what's going on. See what the numbers. It's a lot to it. That's just basic. Like, that's why it takes people who really good at it, really, really good at it, usually have a higher level type of degree. Like a serious PhD or something. That's how deep just research is. So that's just basic research if you want to do it. And like I said, that's just more, you consider it an introduction. But I'm going to get in more into the whole research thing in the next 2 podcasts. Peace and blessings.